Are switchblades legal?
We see the term switchblade used to lend a lot of credibility and make you want to click on news articles and videos, just like this one. Politicians will use the term to make people try and vote a certain way. Whether these people are using the name properly or not is up for debate. However, we know that this gives them a bad rap. Today we're going to set the record straight and tell you the truth about switchblades.
The Federal Switchblade Act defines a switchblade as any knife having a blade which opens automatically by hand pressure applied to a button or other device in the handle of the knife, or by operation of inertia, gravity, or both. In plain English, this definition encapsulates 5 different kinds of knives. First, automatic knives. These are knives that open like a conventional folder, however they do so automatically at the push of a button. At a glance, most people can't tell the difference between an automatic knife and a conventional folder, so a lot of people will choose them because they're similar to the knife they already carry, but offer convenient one-hand opening. Automatic knives became popular in America when Italian immigrants introduced the West to the iconic stiletto. Second, out the front, or OTF knives. These are telescoping knives that shoot out the front of their handle at the actuation of the mechanism. OTFs offer the user a safer experience because at no point in the knife's journey does the edge ever come in contact with where the hand rests. This prevents cuts and keeps the blade aimed in a safe direction at all times. OTFs are divided into 3 groups. First, single action. These knives fire out the front, but they must be manually recharged to close them. These are the most reliable and most powerful of the out the front knives. Second is the double action. Like the single action, these ones shoot out the front. However, the same slide will make it shoot back into the handle. These are slightly less reliable because the blade can come off track, but if it does, don't worry, the knife isn't broken. Simply pull that handle all the way back out, and you're back in business. And lastly, the manual OTF, which is not strictly a switchblade as it does not open automatically. You must push it out all the way yourself and then pull it back in. But you know what's even less legal than switchblades? Not subscribing to Blade HQ. So if you want to call from my lawyer, then go ahead and don't subscribe. But if you never want to hear from me again, then click that button down below. Just kidding. Let's go back to the video. OTFs evolved out of gravity knives in the 1900s. Speaking of, number 3, gravity knives. These knives are opened by gravity pulling the blade out of the handle after the user disengages a lock. These knives were invented as a one-hand operable cutting tool for use by Luftwaffe aircrews during the World Wars. After World War II, German immigrants and veterans brought the gravity knife to the Americas, and they quickly saw just how convenient a one-hand operating knife can be. Fourth, balisongs, or butterfly knives. These knives have 2 handles with a blade in between them, and the user opens it by swinging the knife open. These are perhaps the most famous of the switchblades because their flashy and artistic presentation has made them a star in many action films. While it's up for debate where the balisong was invented, it is agreed upon that it was perfected in the Philippines and used for many Filipino martial arts. It made its way to the Americas with Filipino immigrants in the 1900s. And lastly, ballistic knives. These are knives that can turn their blade into a projectile. These were invented in Soviet Russia in the 1970s as a tool for Spetsnaz operators, but they never found mainstream production. Ballistic knives are extremely rare and extremely regulated. I've held thousands of different knives in my 5 years at Blade HQ, but I have never seen nor held a ballistic knife. I have, however, seen some pretty awesome ballistic knife kill streaks in Call of Duty. Other knives like traditional knives, pocket knives, folding knives, throwing knives, fixed blades, etc. are not regulated under this legislation and are not considered switchblades. Some knives that are not switchblades are actually erroneously called switchblades, like spring-assisted knives. For these, you push on the blade to open them, not on the outside mechanism, therefore they're not a switchblade. But before we get too far into this, please note that nothing we say in this or any video is real legal advice. If you are concerned about whether or not you are following the law, please seek qualified legal counsel in your area. Perhaps nobody is more familiar with American knife laws than Doug Ritter. In addition to being a knife designer and respected survivalist, Doug Ritter started the grassroots advocacy organization Knife Rights, where he has spent years trying to fight for knife rights all over the country. We sat down with Doug and asked him some of our most burning questions about knife legality.
Doug, how you doing today?
I'm doing good. Hi, George.
Hi, thank you so much for meeting with us.
Happy to.
Yeah, so I got some questions for you. First, where did knife laws come from? How did we end up with all of these?
So there are really 2 periods of U.S. history where our knife laws come from. So after the Civil War, We got a lot of our knife laws that prohibit Bowie knives and large knives and dirks, daggers, and that sort of thing.
These knife laws were aimed squarely at black people, trying to prevent them from owning knives to defend themselves. This initiative in the South led to the adoption of dirk or dagger language, which found its way into state laws as far west as California, many of which still stand today.
The next instance where we got a bunch of bad knife laws was in the 1950s.
In 1950, a journalist named Jack Harrison Pollock wrote an article entitled "The Toy That Kills," which described the Italian switchblade as the weapon of choice of the juvenile delinquent, and that it ought to be regulated. Articles like this, as well as depictions of switchblades in movies like Rebel Without a Cause and West Side Story, galvanized legislators into action by depicting these knives as dangerous. New York was the first state to introduce knife regulation, and in 1958, the Federal Switchblade Act was signed into law. At the time, the vast majority of switchblades that were banned were simple cutting tools in the pockets of working class Americans. A look at the history of knife laws in America paints a pretty bleak picture. The Italian stiletto, the German gravity knife, the Filipino balisong, and the large self-defense fixed blades of the Reconstruction era South all were banned. It's not hard to see that these laws were targeted at minority and immigrant populations.
In New York City, those 70,000 people who were prosecuted over the course of a decade, ramping up to almost 10,000 people, 12,000 people a year, 86% of those people were persons of color. Who are the workmen in our cities? You know, who are the people who carry a knife every day? Well, it's not likely the guy going to Wall Street, though there were plenty of those guys stopped too. But it's people who keep our city running, who keep our plumbing going, who keep the electricity working. One of the reasons that we have been successful is we tend to get support from both sides of the aisle when we're going in to fix these laws. Basically, let's get rid of them, let's repeal them. And part of it is because of essentially the racist origins of most of these laws. The vast majority of our bills repealing knife bans, which at this point stands at 44 bills enacted in 27 states, the vast majority have been passed with bipartisan support. And that's really extraordinary given that we're dealing with weapons laws, which almost never get bipartisan support. We have been successful in part because this all started from a bad place. It's always the people at the lower end of the ladder who seem to get hurt the most by this.
Knife rights started pushing for knife reform in 2009, with the first switchblade ban repealed in the state of New Hampshire in 2010. Ritter and his team have been working tirelessly ever since and have now repealed over 44 laws in 27 states at the time of recording.
There are instances where we have spent hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars over the course of a decade to get some of these laws changed. But we're succeeding, so that's a good thing.
As a knife enthusiast, lifelong lover of the sharp and pointy, I am very grateful for the work that Knife Rights has been doing. And I'm wondering, as well as I'm sure the community is wondering, how can we get involved in this? How can we help out Knife Rights on the mission of repealing these knife laws?
So there are two ways we can help. I mentioned it takes hundreds of thousands of dollars and sometimes decades to get this done. Blade HQ is a very generous sponsor of Knife Rights, and we have other industry sponsors, but about half our annual budget comes from individuals. It takes an enormous amount of money to do this. We certainly would welcome people to donate. We would welcome people to at least sign up for our News Slice newsletter. Come late April, early May, we'll be launching our annual Ultimate Steel Spectacular, which is a huge draw with typically $175,000 to $200,000 worth of extraordinary prizes and knives and other prizes valued into the $5,000-6,000 range. We also have circumstances where we ask people to write their legislator. We try to make it easy, but it takes money. As we're talking about this, we're trying to get a bad bill stopped in Washington and a good bill that we've been working on for a decade passed to get rid of Washington's Switchblade automatic knife ban. You know, last year we started a huge litigation campaign. So we're suing the federal government to get rid of most of the Federal Switchblade Act. We're suing the state of California. We sued Philadelphia, the city of Philadelphia, and we won.
But regardless of how terrible these knife laws are, many of them are still in place. It is our duty as Americans to follow the law, but that law is extremely complicated.
There are 44 bills that you've worked on in 27 states, and there's a Federal Switchblade Act. It sounds like knife laws are very complicated, and they tend to target people who are maybe not the most well-off people in the entire country. And it's easy for us to just say, if you have any questions, call a lawyer. But like you said, lawyers are expensive. So what are some resources that people like you and me, just everyday people, can use to find out whether or not a knife is legal in their jurisdiction?
So, courtesy of Blade HQ's sponsorship, we have an app for that. It's called Legal Blade 3.0, available for Android and iPhone. And it lists basically all the laws in the 50 states and DC. It lists the laws in about 40 cities, major cities. It provides a link to where you can find the local laws for almost every jurisdiction in America.
Well, there you have it. Knife laws in America have a very troubled past, but they are changing, largely in part to the work of Knife Rights. If you want to support Knife Rights, you can donate money directly, you can support their giveaway campaign, and you can buy knives from Blade HQ because we make a very sizable donation every single year. Also, if you are concerned about whether or not knives are legal in your area, the Knife Rights app will help you. However, it is no substitute for a lawyer. So if you have any extra concerns, please call a lawyer and find out if it's legal in your area. But we hope now that you've learned that switchblades are not especially dangerous knives. They are knives and they are to be treated with respect, but these are important tools that people all over the country need for their everyday life. It is our duty to help make them more legal, but it is more importantly our duty to follow the law. But if these switchblades are legal in your jurisdiction, I invite you to pick one up. They're a lot of fun. Thank you all for joining us today. If you enjoyed content like this, there's a subscribe button below. Click it and you'll see all the coolest new videos about knives the internet has to offer. We'll see you next time.